What we're going to explain here is the network diagram and a little bit about the critical path and some of the things that you need to know related to the network diagram and schedule management in general. First and foremost, when we have a network diagram, it is a representation of the various activities that we have scheduled. We had determined that there are certain activities that need to be performed to deliver upon a deliverable or the entire project or phase of the project. We also determined how the various activities within our project are related. So we have a relationship between them. Sometimes it's a finish to finish, sometimes it's start to start, if you recall those different associations. But for right now, let's leave those dependencies to another topic. Let's just focus in on the actual relationship between them in terms of the overall network diagram and the critical path. So continuing on with this reference, we have activity A and then activity B. And we'll just assume, because I'm not going to label it, but it's a finish to start. Like I finish A and then I'll start B. But let's also say that at the same time we have an activity C and an activity D. That means then after we finish activity A, then all three of these can start. But again, I'm going to remove these for now because I don't want to add complexity. Keeping it simple, we are going to now progress along this path, or actually what we have are three paths. We have A to B, B to C, and B to D. Now let's say that here at the bottom path, there's also an activity E and let's say an activity X, just to kind of mix up the letters here. And then it goes to another final activity, let's call it F. And in activity C, we have another activity here. Let's just go G, and then on D and G, let's just say there's one that's connecting them. We'll call that H, and that also connects to the end. So at this point, then, we are saying that this is the start of the project. Again, a very simplistic here, just to kind of make it understandable. And then here is the end of the project, or at least this deliverable. So we're not putting in days or any kind of reference to exactly when the work is being done and by whom. We're just strictly looking at the relationship between these various activities in our network schedule diagram. All right, well, let's go ahead and add some times to it. So the durations of A, B, E, X across the bottom here, let's say that activity A is only 1. And now the number or the value that we use can be any value. We could use this in any time unit. It could be in hours, it could be days, it could be man hours, it could be in any kind of construct you wish. Let's go, instead of something like months or years, let's go more simple than that. Let's go with a simple project and just assume that these are days. So the time unit then for all of these are just going to be days. All right. With that in mind, again, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to label them from this point on. It's just assuming they're all going to be full days that are estimated for the duration. And let's go with 5 here, 3, and 4. And then this final one will also make as 4. Now, that means that this path of A, B, E, X, and F is going to be the total of that plus that plus that plus that plus that, because that is the entire path across. So with that in mind, we have a 1 plus 5 plus 3, 4, and a 4, which gives us a total of 17. And in this case, we're using days as our unit of measurement. All right, so that is one of the 3 paths. We know there's 3 paths because here is another path going through the middle, and I'll use another color to demonstrate the path that goes through the top. All right, so with that, let's figure out the times of those other ones. So out of simplicity, I'll just call this path 1. Path 2 will be, if it helps, this is the bottom, this is the middle, and this will be the top. In this middle will be our green path, and this has the A as well. Even though it's on the bottom, it is also on the middle too. C, G, H, and F. So let's give those some times. 1 is already for A. So we have, let's say, 6 and a 5 days duration, and we'll make this a 5 days as well. And then a 4 here. So simple math gives us 1 day, 6, 5, 5, and a 4, totaling up to 21 days. And then finally, let's do that for the same for the top. Going here, really the only additional activity we need time for is D. That makes A, D, H, and F. So it only has 4 activities on it. A 1, a 9, a 5, and a 4, giving us 19 days. All right, that gives us then the 3 paths that are at this point of our project. And now this could change as the project progresses, but at this current moment, there are 3 pathways for our project. And we have to figure out, in a time's sake, which one of these has the most concern in terms of time. And because, again, it's not the work, I'm going to stress here, it is, I'll draw a little clock here to indicate that it is about the time. Which one is most critical in time? And that one is our critical path. And that really just simply means the one with the longest amount of time that is going to take to complete. And that would be the middle path. Now, if for some reason, let's say this G was estimated to be 5, but after some review, we figure out, you know what, it's only going to take us a day because we don't actually have to build that piece of equipment or software or really perform the hard work of that activity G. We actually already own it. It was already produced by another product or another project team within our organization, so we already have it done. And so we've actually been able to save 4 days of work, and our estimation has now changed, which also means then that our equation has also changed. Instead of a 5, we are now at a 1, which gives us a new, instead of 21, gives us a new estimate of 1017, which now means that we no longer have that being the critical path, but this top one is the critical path. I stress that because the critical path throughout your project could change. Hence, it's very important for you to know which one is the critical path. In this case, it's right now this top one, but also the near critical path. And in this case, there are actually 2 near critical paths, because both of these are the next in line, and that's good and important for you to know, because just like we had G changing, the G could escalate again. It could go, actually, you know what, we found out there's more to it, and it's now a 10. And now that major jump, and I'll erase that so it's not confusing, we'll stay with our 1. But if it were to drastically change, well, now that becomes the critical path. And as a project manager, you need to be aware and keep sights on these are estimates. They're shifting values. And so as a project manager, you have to keep looking out for these things and keeping aware, so that way you never get too many surprises on terms of how the project is going. Because again, you are needing to see and to make certain that you are meeting the time expectations for the project. And if the expectations are that they're going to be met here, and currently it's a 19-day duration for this deliverable or project total, so in 19 days we are expecting that to be done. And that could be based purely on our summation of our estimates up to that point, or maybe it's dictated to you in some way. And maybe we need to crash or squeeze or condense this timeline even further from 19 days into something even tighter. And you would have to work really hard to make sure that nothing goes beyond that 19-day commitment. But for right now, we're just going to assume that you are committing to 19 days and you're fine with that based on realistic estimates of the activities within these paths. All right, so now what we're going to need to do is take a look at a few things that will help us with our estimation of working on early starts, early finishes, late finishes, early starts, and early finishes. There's 4 of them there. We're going to look at slack and other things. So let's pause here for a moment so I can clear some of my screen because there's a lot to talk about. All right, so we have determined that this is our critical path. So because of that, I want to highlight it so it really stands out as that is our critical path that is supposed to take us 19 days. Now, any of these activities, we can make a little chart, and it could vary based on how you want to create it. But let's just look at activity A. In activity A, we can look at the earliest it can start, the latest it can start, the earliest it can finish, and the latest it can finish. Now, these places where I have the letters set out can vary based on what program you're using. It really doesn't matter. There's no official order, but we can go with E's across the top and L's around the bottom. That doesn't matter. What does matter is that you know how to do it. Yes, a lot of the software, the project management systems that you use, the information systems, or say Microsoft Project or any of those powerful programs, are going to be able to perform a lot of these calculations for you. Nevertheless, it's good for you to comprehend how they arrived at these numbers, and also for the exam, you might have some simplified questions to ask and figure out. All right, let's take activity A. Well, the question first and foremost is, when is the absolute earliest that A can start? Now, there's 2 realistic answers for this, and I'm going to point that out for you. One answer could be that you can start it at day 1. You can also say you can start it immediately at day 0. I can just start. So either way is correct as long as you stay with it through the rest of the project. You cannot switch between a day 1 and a day 0 concept, because all your calculations will be off by, well, 1 day. And so I have, over the 14 years teaching project management students, have gone between these 2, and I have found that it's best just to teach one of them, and then if you're curious, I can teach you on the side the next one. And I've also discovered that it is so much easier just to teach it in a day 0 concept. So if you are curious about the day 1, which I probably would guess is more common in most instruction, but I feel that it will make more sense to you if I use the day 0 and then have you learn the day 1 from beyond this point. So working on that, I am saying that the start is, off you go. We're day 0. So the earliest you can start is 0, right? You can start immediately working on activity A. And hence, that's what helps when you don't think about it in a time unit. You just say, all right, we're here. It's Monday morning. When can I start on A? Well, I can start on A right now. We can get to work. And that just makes it easier to think about that we're just starting immediately. Now, the next question is, when's the latest it can start? Well, there's not really much wiggle room, is there? And I'll say that because if you look, yes, it's on this path going down the bottom, but it also is part of the critical path. And if you, as the project manager, are worried about keeping the time constraint of the 19 days, you need to ensure that everything on the critical path is getting done in the time that it's estimated. And in that case, there is no time to waste working on A because everything on the critical path is also waiting for it to be done. Hence, the latest it can start or should start in terms of a project management, schedule management, is 0. Well, now the next question is, well, when's the earliest we can expect it to be done or finish? Hence, here is where the mathematics gets so much easier when we are saying if it's going to take us 1 day to do it, we started on day 0, what is 0 plus 1? See, brilliant, right? It is a 1. The earliest we can expect it is the end of that day. And likewise, the latest it can finish would also be that day 1. Again, fairly simple, thinking that if we started on a 0 and we're going to finish it on that same day. Likewise, we started it on a 0, we're going to finish it that same day. So the reason is because you can see there's no difference between the starts and the finishes because there is no float or slack. There's none of it. Because this critical path that we've already highlighted going through is taut like a string. If I tightened it from end to end, it cannot move. Hence, there is no flexibility in our early and late starts and early and late finishes because they are just fixed. And then going up and down is just purely our duration estimates for, in this case, activity A, which we thought would take 1 day. And so 0 plus 1, 0 plus 1. And that is the simple one because that's nice and easy. It's at the beginning. But let's pick one that's more in the middle, and that will make things a little more difficult. So let me erase all this. I'll draw that same box, kind of like a tic-tac-toe. I'll do another color just so that it stands out. And let's go with G. G is right here, right smack in the middle of it all. And we can do the same thing. Early start, early finish, and late finish. Well, the duration, as we know, we re-estimated it to be a 1. So we already know that the differences between these should also be 1. But we also have to look at if there is any float or slack to it. Well, how do we determine if there's any float or slack to it? Well, the critical path we know is 19. The path that G is on is 17. What's the difference? That difference is 2 days. Let me explain how that visually works in a scenario. So you are the one, let's say this is you, give you a cool little haircut or something, and you are the one who is assigned to perform the work of activity G. You have other work that needs to be done, and if it's day 1 or day 0, you can't work on G because A and C must be done first. So you have to wait for A to be finished, so that's 1 day there, and then you have to wait 6 days right now for this activity C to be finished. So 1 plus 6 is 7. So the earliest we can expect you to start on this would in fact be the day 7. Now, if you don't work on it on day 7 as expected, as a project manager, are you going to be worried? No, not in a time sense. You might be worried in sort of a team management way, but in a time sense, like a schedule management, no, you're not, because you still have some flexibility. And how do we know that? Well, we have the 2 days, because if you don't start this on day 8, don't start it on 9, now once we get to 10, you have now tilted which one is the critical path. So let's figure out then what's the absolute latest we should get this started before we start to worry. And also let's finish with, if we do in fact start on day 9, what's the earliest we can expect it to be finished? Well, if its duration is a day, then you add 1 day to 7, and simple math, it's an 8. So we're expecting it to be done at the earliest, day 8. But the latest start, now we can go what's called a forward pass, going this way, or backward pass, starting at the end and working our way backwards. Either way, it doesn't really matter, but if you're going with the late finish, I would start at the finish. If you're going with the late start, I would start at the start. Forward, backwards. Again, it depends on what the arrangement of the network diagram is and how it makes sense for you. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have 2 days of relaxation and time sense between that and the critical path. So that means that 7 plus 2 is 9. So as long as we start it by day 9, then we should achieve the path and all the work in time for our expectations of having it all complete on the 19th day. So with that in mind, we also then can go with, well, if we finish it on day 8, when's the absolute latest then it could be finished? Well, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can go 9 plus 1 to equal 10, or you can go 8 plus 2 to equal 10. Either way, as long as we have this finished by day 10, then we have plus 5 here is 15, plus 4 here, that equals 19, and in fact, yay, party, we are going to have the project completed at said time. So whatever activity you are pinpointing on the network diagram, you can create such a chart that will help you determine how much early start you have or leverage you have in terms of scheduling and time management, and also making certain that if you are on the critical path, this is always going to be 0. There's not going to be any difference between earlys and lates. But if you're not on the critical path, say if you took G, or instead of G tried E, you would say that it is like the G in terms of both of these having some flexibility because of the float and the slack to allow it to not maybe start the exact day of, maybe start the next day because of it not being on the critical path. But everything on the critical path is critical that it's done when we think it should be done. And that's a quick look at the critical path and early and late starts and early and late finishes, and how you can explore and learn and help with the time management of your schedule.